He wasn't a bad student. He wasn't lazy. But somehow, every exam he took, he failed. In a classroom filled with quiet pencils and rustling pages, his mind always moved slower than the clock. While others finished early and walked out smiling, he was still stuck on the first question, trying to make sense of the words. He wanted to understand. He wanted to improve. But no matter how hard he tried, the results never changed. And slowly, the world began to label him. Slow, behind, not enough. And the worst part was, eventually, he started to believe it too. At home, there were no angry words, no shouting, no lectures, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than being yelled at. His parents didn't need to say anything. Their eyes said enough. We expected more. He sat at the dinner table staring at his food, pretending everything was normal. But deep down, a sad truth began to grow inside him. If I can't make them proud, then maybe I'm disappointing them just by existing. And that thought stayed with him longer than any failure ever did. That night, he sat at his desk, staring at the same books and the same notes he had seen 1,000 times. His room was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. Every sentence he read felt heavier than the last. He tried repeating the chapters, writing summaries, even whispering answers to himself, but nothing felt like it stayed. His chest tightened, his eyes burned, and finally, in a voice so small he could barely hear it himself, he whispered, "Maybe I'm just not good enough." And once those words escaped his lips, they felt true. The next day, on his walk home from school, he dragged his feet across the sidewalk like each step weighed more than the last. He wasn't angry at the world. He was tired. Tired of trying, tired of failing, tired of pretending he was okay. He stopped near a small bench beside an old garden wall, a place he had walked past 1,000 times without ever really noticing. And on that bench sat an older man quietly feeding birds. The boy didn't say anything, but the man looked at him, not with judgment, not with expectation, but with understanding. And gently he asked, "Long day?" The boy didn't speak, he just nodded. They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the quiet rhythm of the world around them. The old man watched the birds flutter at his feet and said quietly, "Do you know what's interesting about them?" The boy shook his head. The man smiled softly. "A bird does not rush to fly, it hops first. It learns balance, it observes the wind, and only when its wings are ready, it takes off." The boy looked at the birds, small, simple, unnoticed, yet somehow free. The old man continued, "Not everything in life is meant to happen quickly. Some things grow slowly, and the things that take time—" He paused, watching a bird lift gently into the sky, "often last the longest." That night, something felt different. He didn't rush to open his books. He didn't sit down with fear or pressure or the familiar voice whispering, "Don't fail again." Instead, he took a deep breath and began slowly. He didn't study to prove anything. He studied to understand, even if it took longer. And for the first time, every mistake didn't feel like proof that he wasn't enough. It felt like a step, a small one, but a step forward. Days passed, and slowly, almost quietly, something began to change. He didn't suddenly become the smartest. He didn't get perfect grades, but he started understanding things that once felt impossible. A math problem finally made sense. A sentence he used to reread now felt clear on the first try. They were small improvements, tiny steps, but to him they felt like victories. And every time he understood something new, he whispered to himself, "See, maybe I can learn." With each passing week, his small improvements began to gather like gentle steps on a long path. And even though he wasn't first, he was no longer last. One afternoon at school, as he handed in his work, his teacher paused, just for a moment, and nodded. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't a celebration, but it was the first time someone noticed he was moving forward. And that tiny moment, that single silent nod, felt bigger than any grade he had ever received. But progress is never a straight line. And one afternoon, after weeks of steady improvement, a difficult assignment was returned to him. A low grade, lower than he expected. And just like that, the old fears began to whisper again. Maybe the little progress wasn't real. Maybe you're just fooling yourself. Maybe this is where you stop. He stared at the paper in his hands, not angry, not frustrated, just tired. Tired of hoping, tired of climbing, tired of starting again. And for the first time in weeks, he wondered if the world was right about him after all. That evening he walked the same path home, but this time his steps were slower, heavier, like the weight inside him had finally become too much to carry. He found himself returning to the same bench where he had met the old man before, as if his heart knew the way even when his mind didn't. The old man was there again, sitting quietly as if he had been waiting. The boy sat beside him, saying nothing. After a long pause, he whispered, "I tried, but I failed again." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from finally telling the truth he had been holding inside. The old man didn't rush to answer. He let the silence sit between them, the kind of silence that holds patience instead of pressure. Then softly he said, "Do you remember what I told you?" The boy nodded, though his eyes stayed on the ground. The man continued, "Growth takes time, and sometimes it takes setbacks too." The boy looked up confused. The man smiled, not a wide smile, but the kind that comes from someone who has walked many difficult roads. "Failure isn't a wall," he said quietly. "It's a door. The difference is whether you walk away or try again." The boy swallowed, feeling something shift inside him. Not confidence yet, but something softer. Permission to continue. That night, he didn't sit at his desk out of fear. He didn't study because he wanted to prove something, or because he was afraid of failing again. He sat down because something inside him had changed. The old man's words stayed in his mind. Failure isn't a wall, it's a door. So he opened his books, slowly, patiently, without rushing. And for the first time, he wasn't running from failure. He was walking toward growth. And even though the road ahead was still long, this time, he wasn't afraid of the journey. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, his effort began to show. Problems that once confused him now made sense. Sentences he used to reread now felt clear the first time. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't perfect, but he was improving. And for the first time in his life, he could see the progress. And with every small success, something inside him grew. Not pride, but belief. Belief that maybe he was capable of more than he ever thought. Then one morning, everything felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. When the teacher returned the recent assignments, he looked at his paper expecting the same disappointment he had always known. But instead, there it was, a grade higher than he had ever seen before. Not perfect, not the best in the class, but better. And as he stared at it, a slow smile formed, the kind of smile that comes from deep inside, built from quiet effort and silent nights no one saw. No applause, no celebration. Just a simple moment when he finally felt something he hadn't felt before. Proud of himself. After school, he walked home with the same backpack, the same shoes, the same road he had walked 100 times before. But somehow, everything felt different. The world wasn't brighter, he was. He paused near the river where the old man had once spoken to him, and for a moment he just stood there, listening to the sound of flowing water. And in that quiet space, he realized something. Confidence is not something you're born with. It is something you build, slowly, patiently, one effort past fear, one lesson past failure, one step past doubt. So if you're listening now and you feel behind, or tired, or unsure of your place in the world, Then remember this. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to catch up. You just need to keep going. Because growth is quiet. Progress takes time. And strength is built long before the world ever notices. Your story is not over. You are still becoming. And your best chapter has not been written yet.